Looking at John Rollins' house on Bald Head Road in the town of Aroostook, Maine. The right-hand half of the house dates back to the early 1700s. The left-hand half John added in the 70s when he decided to move up here as part of his retirement. This is John's antenna tower. It's about 80 feet tall, and it was built by John and his friends in the 70s. It used to be the center of a horizontal V-beam which extended 1,000 feet on each leg out over the marsh grass that's to the west of us. And it was focused on Europe and Africa. Makes quite an antenna. What's still on the tower, and you can see the spacers running up to it, is a end-fed wire that slopes down in towards the marsh grass and is anchored over there. And to the left, off the top of the tower, is one end of his 80-meter dipole. Inside of John's radio room, and you can see the two sets of feeders that come through the wall. They go to grounding switches in that gray box, and then take off one to the tower for the V-beam, and the smaller one in front of us here goes horizontally, makes a 90-degree corner, and goes up to the 80-meter dipole. John, we're going to show this to the gentleman at AWA, and I know that you want very much to be there and cannot, so we thought we'd take this and give them a tour of your radio room and some of your secrets. So if there's anything you'd like to say to them, go ahead.
The only thing I'd like to say is that I miss coming to the AWA, especially the amateur hour, and miss meeting you fellows, which I've enjoyed over the years, and just encourage you to keep up the good work that we've been doing and keep it up for the future.
Nice tuning network. So these were separate for each band? You had looks like a plug-in coil?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, very nicely done.
I've got a complete set of plug-in coils, and it just takes a bit of titivating to find out where it falls.
That's a technical term, titivating.
Yeah, but once you've got it, it's easy enough to zero it, and it'll zero in anything.
Let me just walk in over here and get a look at these. These are very nicely built. And you've got the panel meters in line there with each feed. And
those are old pre-1930 panel meters.
Yeah, very nice.
I saw those somewhere and I bought them all.
And you've got one of the famous Rollins VFOs over here.
Oh yeah, that's a Rollins VFO. And that runs anything at the moment. It's running this one here.
Okay. I'm gonna turn around and get to that bench.
Yeah.
In a minute. Okay. And then what do we have down here? We've got, and this is a receiver that you've built.
Yeah, that doesn't show up very well.
The PW dial on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a Superhet. I had never built a Superhet before, and I said, geez, I should build one just so I can say I built one.
Sure.
So I built it. There, see, you can see all three of them lined
yes.
up like that. And the 3-gang.
Air variable. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that works quite well. The only thing that's I fault with it is it only has one intermediate frequency stage in it.
Okay.
And really you need 2. But the intermediate frequency coils that I had were also national, big ones. So there wasn't really room enough to put another stage in there.
When did you build this, John?
20 odd years ago.
Okay.
And I made it for 40 and 80. And I was trying to make it for 20 meters. And that is a challenge.
Is this the coil you were building up for 20 meters?
Yeah. And to change it, to come off a frequency, God, you only need to peel off a quarter turn with that damn thing, you know.
Right.
And you're forever resoldering it and then sliding it in a set of cans like this.
Yeah.
And so I got this to work very well down on the 25 and 30 meter shortwave bands. And that's as close as I got to 20.
No, never got it up to 20 meters.
No, I gave up on that. That one you know.
Yep.
The Gross.
That's a Gross. That's one you've restored.
Jerry Gross. And that came from Bill Orr.
Oh, this is Bill Orr's?
Yeah.
Really? No kidding.
And some years ago I had written an article on the Gross. And he saw it, and he wrote me a note and said, I've got a Gross, and if you will restore it for me and send me pictures from my scrapbook, you can have it.
Wow.
But you'll have to come get it. So I was going to get in a plane and go out and get it. Gee, I wasn't about to let that
Absolutely.
go by. And I happened to mention it to Parker. And Parker was going out to Kansas City and something. And so I mentioned it to him and he said, don't worry about a thing, I'll get it and bring it home to you. Which he did. He drove all the way out there.
He drove out to California?
To San Francisco.
Wow.
And collected it. Brought it all the way back here and deposited it in my body. That's pretty good service.
I would say so. Now, what kind of condition was that in when you got it from Bill?
It just needed to be refinished.
Yep.
And most of the wiring was all right. And it works very well.
You got some nice plug-in coils.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nicely done.
It has 2 power supplies, gross power supplies. One is the higher voltage for the pair of whatever you've got, TZ20s or TZ40s,
yeah.
whatever you've got. That's the higher voltage. And then the other power supply is 350 volts for the first 2 stages.
Okay.
All right?
And that looks very similar to that replica that you built for Marshall.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Very nicely done.
Yeah. But no, I was pleased to get that one.
We've seen the Gross here,
Yeah.
and we've got another rig.
This one is one that I've built in the last 4 or 5 years. It uses an 860
Right.
tetrode. And I'd never used one before. And somebody told me, he says, well, you got to use that, you got to do this and that, and the other thing, it'll work fine. Bud Hall
Okay.
uses them. And I said, but I couldn't get it to work. Well, what are you doing? He said, well, it'll never work that way. And he told me how to work it. And boy, it's been trouble-free.
Wow.
And so all it is a 47,
Okay.
a 210,
Okay.
and the 860.
Okay.
That's all. And I drive it with the VFO that clips right on here.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is your power supply in back of it?
Those are power supplies for this whole damn thing. That's the only thing that's the problem with something like this. It takes power supplies and power supplies and power supplies.
Oh, yeah.
Well, 1, 2, 3 different filament voltages.
And what's the plate voltage on the 860?
It's rated to run 3,000 volts, but I run it 1,600 volts is all. It's trouble-free.
Now, was this a design that you would come up with, John, or was this something that you
No,
had?
this is something I just laid up.
And I see you've got your favorite national capacitors in there.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And it works beautifully. It worked fine from the time I plugged it in. I couldn't believe it. Usually I build something and then I spend the next 3 months trying to make it work. Tune plate, tune grid. This is the grid tune circuit. And those are made up from single 140 picofarad capacitors. Marshall must have had those by the dozens and dozens, as they were in RCA receivers. And gosh, he gave me half a dozen, which I've used. And Parker's got a bunch, etc. But I found that there are 140 picofarad if they're complete, and I can turn a new shaft for them,
Mm-hmm.
and then make new spacers for this, and insulators and spacers for the bottom, and there you've got a tune grid.
You've got a trick to winding up the copper tubing.
It's a lot of people think so, but it isn't really.
How do you do it?
Well, first of all, I have either 2.5 or 3 inch plastic tubing. All right. Then one end of the tubing, I flatten out and drill a hole in it, and then that goes through a pin on the coil form, and then I pull it out tight, and I wind it up a step at a time, tight all the time, and with these up tight like that.
Okay.
And the secret is to keep the whole things tight. Then after you've got, in this case, for 80 meters it takes about 12 turns, so I make 13 turns on it. And then after you've got it ready, then I'll take a screwdriver that has a long, like about a 1/4 inch shaft on it. And I poke that through one end to the other, and then I work it through the whole thing, and that spreads this out very evenly, very uniformly. And that's all there is to it. It's quite easy.
Understand you caught a helicopter one day.
Yes, unfortunately I did.
Can you tell us about it?
All right. The 2 antennas went across this marsh that's down below the house. And the two antennas went clear across the marsh to the other side. And a Navy helicopter came around one day. They were looking for somebody that had pitched off the bridge. And for some reason they came in here, and they came in, well, they must have come in about 50 feet. And he snagged that first wire, and I was in the cellar at the time, and I heard this pop, 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 pop going around, and then I heard this burst to power, and I said, oh Jesus, what the hell's that? So I stuck my head out just in time to see him rounding out just above the cattails like that, you know. And all I could think of was, my God, that must have given him an awful sinking feeling. Because, first of all, he had to catch the wire, and then that wire was pulled up. It had a 130-pound counterweight at the far end. So it had to pull up 138 pounds all the way up to 100 feet, tugging on this wire, you know. And then when it gets up to the top like that, the wire breaks, and all of a sudden he shot out like that, you know, and I thought, oh my God. But he recovered, and then he pulled up, and he started circling all around. I hid behind a tree. And he started circling all around, all around, all around. And of course it was a V-beam, so there were two wires like that. This was the one he caught. He went underneath that one and didn't touch that at all. But anyway, for a week or two after that, every day I used to think, well, is the letter going to come today from the Navy? And they never wrote about it. But gee whiz, that gave me an awful start.
All right, gentlemen. So what are we looking at now, Tim?
John,
All right?
tell us about growing up.
Yeah.
And radios.
We have this one.
Yep,
Don't let go. Okay.
I'm not let go.
All right, this one.
And what is this one?
This was produced as a kit
Okay.
by a company in downtown Manhattan. I can't remember the name of the company. But it sold for $5. And the theme on the ad was "Tune in the world on 2 tubes."
Okay.
And I was about 10 then. And I talked my brother into buying it. And they made it so you could have it either with a pair of 30s for battery operation,
Okay.
or 56s for AC operation. And Christ, my brother went in and bought it. He said, no, we don't want batteries. We'll have it for AC.
Okay.
So he got it with the AC tubes. That was as far as he went. And so it sat there in my room for 3 or 4 months. He said, I'll get a power supply, I'll get a power supply. He was not a radio man. He didn't know a power supply from an egg beater. And he said, I'll get a power supply. And so he figured around, and at one point he brought a power supply in that was as long as that. And I said, that won't do, that won't do. So was 4, 5, 6 months that I never got to use it.
Mm.
And finally, I met a fellow a few years, half a dozen years older than I was, that became my mentor. And he said, "Oh, well, what you need is a power supply. Tell me about it, you know." He says, "Well, I got the parts, we'll make one up." So he made that up for me. Anyway, I had put this together when I got it, and it looked like a 10-year-old. Didn't get any idea. And so it wouldn't work, and I showed it to this friend that I had just met, and he said, "Well, we can fix that." So the first thing he did was take a soldering iron, and he unhooked every damn thing that I had in the bottom of it, you know. I didn't say a word, my mouth was kind of, and he rewired it like that. He said, "Now that's how you want to do neat wiring that you can follow and it will work," which it did. Works very nice.
So that's your first receiver.
Huh?
That was your first receiver you've got on your lap. What about
my first receiver?
What about your first transmitter?
Oh hell! Because I got my license a year or two before World War II broke out, and this same mentor that I had, he made me up a breadboard with a tube in it, a triode, for a Hartley.
Okay.
And showed me how to tune it up and how to run it out on an antenna, and I used that, and I made all kinds of chirps and squirks with that for, I think, 2 years.
This elegant building is John's workshop. It's where he creates his radios, he does his gunsmithing, tool and die work, loading shells for the target shooters, and stores a large quantity of treasures. A new project.
And what happens in here, John?
Pardon?
What happens in here?
All my radio,
All your radio.
all my gunsmithing,
Okay.
all my tool and die work.
Okay.
What more could a man ask for?
This was for Bob Lundstrom.
Ah, okay.
And it's just all it is a mopa.
Yeah.
And this is my favorite coal pitch tuner
Yeah.
with a 10 here, and then a 10 amplifier there.
And there are the coils that plug in here.
Yeah.
It's a beauty.
It's your workbench or gun. What is this? Radio and gunsmithing, woodworking.
Radio and gunsmithing.
Okay.
And that, you're looking at probably the only solid mahogany workbench in the United States. And I made that in South America years ago and shipped it up.
Very good.
I don't know what it cost the company to pay for shipping it. I didn't pay for it, but I like to build. And it's nice to have somebody that I can give it to. Otherwise, I just have to tear it apart and do something else.